Dear all the examiners, my name is Raezita Dinar Nareswari from International 8B. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to deliver my thesis video to you. It is about aggregate planning and S&OP strategy to improve sales and profitability case study at PT XYZ. Special thanks to my thesis supervisor, Pawahid, with all your guidance to make this thesis true. First of all, here is the presentation overview that is divided into some sections. First is a background about the PT XYZ and why this thesis topic was selected. Then the problem statement that PT XYZ faced with some challenge, the objective of the thesis as the solution of the problems, and the methods that describe the steps how this thesis is done. And then the analysis and result from the implementation of the methods, and finally the conclusion and recommendation based on what it is found for further research and the company later. For the company overview, since the company information is too confidential, here is so far that I can describe about the company. PT XYZ is one of the biggest international engineering and service companies in Europe, Finland. The main office is in Jakarta with several business in Surabaya, Bali, Bandung, Sumatra, Makassar, and Yogyakarta. PT XYZ builds and services elevators and escalators, moving walkways, automatic building doors and gates, monitoring access and destination control systems. One of the market players that provides the products under full service contract agreements due to its high initial labor costs with technical expertise and short service cycle. Hotel and office segments are mainly PT XYZ's customer, followed by residential and retail. The orders received are handled as project with the contract base, and it is divided into some stages like other job construction in general. They are tendering, initiating, validating, planning, executing, handover, and closure. Why this thesis is made? It has been always interesting since 2020 to apply an observation in some companies about how internal and external change by the COVID outbreak impact their business as well as their performance. It might be the first in the world and foremost a human tragedy affecting millions of people as well as global economy, including PT XYZ. As we know, the COVID has been forcing the governments across the world to slow down the outbreak by restricting of movement of people, closing temporary or limiting operations in job site. Even in China, which PT XYZ has one of the largest factories there, until this year still enforced to close or temporary shutdowns, and of course it significantly impacted the timing of deliveries, equipment installation duration, as well as overall sales of the equipment. The phenomenon of the delayed shipment also was expected to still happen during 2021 due to other reasons such as limited vessel capacity or congestion at some port. So here I observe that strategic planning can be a very useful tool as an approach for change management in this pandemic situation and a form of resilience. And I think it is the most important task for the company in order to keep meeting their demand and sustainability with certain strategic plan in this hard situation. So we come to the problem definition. As we can see here in the graph of the sales decrease trend in the past few years, refer to PT XYZ business outlook in 2020 and 2021, accepting COVID-related factors, PT XYZ profitability could have been running in positive shape. However, it was estimated that its sales have been declined, and the rate of decline in sales will depend on the duration of the severity of the COVID itself related to government action and the recovery pace. Beside election outcome factor that some investors believe it has impacted the market significantly, the continuation of pandemic resulted even broader economic downturn, which could have a prolonged negative impact even worsen. Not only PT XYZ, but also many other companies have prepared for a post-pandemic world by restructuring to account for the lost revenue. For example, here PT XYZ, the work contract of more than 60 operative headcount have massively been terminated, and of course, it has been questioned whether the capacity of the organization can afford to balance the current demand. Moreover, as market competency also keep growing during pandemic, XYZ still optimistically scale the order sales. Definitely, it strengthened the contrary between the upcoming demand and their current limited resource. Therefore, the objective of this thesis, after some questions have been addressed, is to introduce the way of correct forecasting and aggregate planning as a strategic operations plan. Because with the questions addressed, management needs more strategic plans and decision makings of the workforce size or employees laid off, since taking more orders is expected during pandemic and operations should follow the pace to complete the orders. Aggregate planning may help them to achieve the sales and profitability goals with current limited resource or capacity. Here in this research, it is showed how PTXYZ should predict the demand for the next 12 months and find the best forecasting method to meet the demand prior to develop aggregate planning model. Then several optional strategies here for developing the aggregate plans are explored to be selected and adopted later as the best options. How is the method to conduct this research? It is required systematic procedures to conduct this research, and there are 5 steps to do. In stage 1 here, I tried to clarify and explore the research questions which are now the management dilemma or concern, so that the research could be the value for the company as suggested improvement. In this process, it was expected to find big idea what possible and reasonable actions that available for management to correct the problem or take into consideration in stage 2. It was prepared for the next step after questions addressed by exploring some literatures, and the path was followed through quantitative research design. Then in the third stage, it was started to collect and prepare some required data. It was through interview with the key stakeholder and some observations. In stage 4, all data gathered was through many analyses where aggregate planning and SNOP model was implemented to the current planning process and proved that the theory with the simulation can contribute or improve the desired performance. Then finally, in the last stage, forecasting and aggregate plans new model can be as an output or research recommendation for future researchers. For the data collection, some of the data collection methods covered here are quantitative data because it is dealing with something that can be counted. Primary and secondary data were needed in this research, where primary data that gathered from myself for next year's sales figure, current resource data that available for projects including installation and testing allocations, current work elements, and average lead time data for each project's activity and average project's lead time based on its complexity. While the secondary data that has been there from archive report, our sales and margin history from the past few years, average cost spending, historical product platform, previous studies collected from some researchers relating to forecasting and aggregate planning. And for the method, I use gap analysis first as the initial method to compare between current state and future state because it also good tools to formulate the steps carefully. For example, in this table, I try to describe what is now the condition and what the actions proposed in order to meet the research goals. Like now, PTXYZ has current limited resource after restructure prevents to reach desired demand and targeted sales, and there is no fundamental method or specific strategical plan. It is desired to have the resource utilization as well as the cost optimization to fulfill the forecasted demand. So by analyzing the historical demand and translating data into time series demand, then evaluating some forecasting and aggregate planning methods using time series model and mathematical model with some scenarios to find optimum numbers with very minimum cost. And then, after some actions were elaborated, both the forecasting and aggregate planning methods followed. For example, for evaluating some of forecasting methods, three methods were evaluated after some exploration. They are simple moving average, weighted moving average, exponential smoothing. While three strategies for developing aggregate planning model were also tested. They are aggregate planning with leveling strategy, which I also divided into two scenarios. Aggregate planning with chasing strategy, also it has two scenarios. Then with hybrid or mixed strategy, which combine both strategies. Those methods were selected later and said effective if they have lowest numbers of forecasting errors and lowest costs. And we go to the analysis. First is for the forecasting analysis. The sales figures from the past year is as the input data to know which method is the most effective one. The graph shows here the simulation of each method, which we can see the trend between the months. Blue ones are the actual unit completion as the demand, and the orange one as the forecasting simulation month to month, which we can see the weighted moving average tend to more fluctuating, while simple moving average and exponential smoothing method is relatively constant. If we see the result with each forecast error result, here it is compared between its mean absolute error, mean squared error, and mean absolute percentage error. Simple moving average shows the biggest number of percentage error, more than 20%, while the exponential smoothing shows the lowest number, below 10%. Even weighted moving average in the previous graph shows more fluctuating trend. It is in the middle. So we can say that exponential smoothing tend to the most accurate forecast compared to others with total unit demand full year roughly 530 units. And now we go to the analysis of aggregate planning as the next step. The expected monthly demand after the forecasting result is defined and selected as the input one. Then combined with all the set of variables and cost information gathered from primary and secondary data. The variables, if we can see here, there are the numbers of workforce, including installer and tester, the total hours spent to install and test the materials, labor costs, material and other costs, holding costs, hiring and layoff costs, backlog or stock out costs, and the average revenue for its sale. Here on the right side are the simulation of each strategy and scenario. In all scenario, basically, PT XYZ currently has no initial inventory nor backlog because the installation is done just in time. For example, in this leveling strategy is to find how much the number of installer and tester needed as well as their cost that PT XYZ will gain if the capacity is level up to anticipate any backlogs where here allowed to hire and lay off people as much as they can in the first year without additional overtime or additional subcontractors in order to keep the inventory level is safe. However, in this level strategy, it might lead to the contrary since elevator and escalator operation is different with the usual production activity, which can install the equipment on the site in advance, even there might be an option to store the equipment earlier. Hence, another alternative with this strategy is also proposed without exceeding inventory is allowed so that the output of monthly installation just exactly met the desired demand. Then the chasing strategy wants also with two scenarios where PT XYZ can select the option to do overtime only if the targeted demand exceeds the capacity, or to use subcontractors only if they do not want to pay overtime. Then last but not least, for hybrid strategy that using the combination of previous level and chase strategy, this strategy is to define the optimum numbers of hard and laid-off workers with the help of both overtime and subcontractors. PT XYZ can also have other options to be combined in this strategy, such as letting the inventory in safe position with maximizing hirings or overtime hours, or considering more backlogs if the customers are willing to wait the installation schedule. And here the result of those strategies. With the implementation of these strategies, it can be proven with the cost and margin calculation. Each of them has significant difference between each others. For example, leveling strategy can contribute some margins, but it's not much as chasing strategy, which the margin is better. However, the hybrid one shows more significant impact to the company if it's implemented because it could contribute the margin more than 50%. And for the conclusion and recommendation, aligned to research purpose, first we can conclude that having the right forecasting as the first step before generating aggregate planning is really important. From what is simulated in this research, the exponential smoothing method has proven the effective forecasting with minimum error 7%. And then after the best forecasting method was implemented, three aggregate planning strategies in this research were evaluated, where some scenarios are constrained to be adjusted so that the plans will not across the company's limit and policies. Then we can conclude also that hybrid strategy is the best aggregate planning method to apply, which more fits the current capacities and gives the significant margin percentage for the company more than 50%. For the recommendation, I suggest here two sites for future research and for the company. For future research, because the research is still using one forecasting method only, which is time series approach, it is suggested to explore more methods such as causal methods in order to gain more accurate demand forecast. For example, through statistical software such as Arena or MATLAB, subsector of economic sales or profit activity, as well as market survey information can be indicated for supporting the data and the consideration. For the company, because the hybrid or mixed strategy is very dynamic strategy, it can have the side effect for the company that is not ready with the quick change and tend to have resistance to the fluctuation. I think this definitely needs more analysis in the future how the operations manager should take the right decision in certain conditions. So I think that was the last part, and thank you for watching my whole videos. I hope that the information well received and can give some new insight to other students. Thank you for your attention. Stay healthy and bye.